Hello and welcome to Setting the Stage, episode 22, Natowa and Akrimyos. We are looking for more people to interview, so if you're a DM or you know a DM that might be interested in coming on the show, you can check out more about how to apply at www.gocorral.com/sts. And without any further ado, let's get into the show. Today I'm here with Natowa, and we're going to talk about his world, Akrimyos. Am I saying that right?
It is.
Okay. But first, let's hear a little bit more about yourself and who you are outside of the game.
Sure. Thank you for having me. So my name on the internet is Natowa. In real life, my name is Michael. I live in France. I started playing a role-playing game like very late compared to a bunch of people, I guess, like really in my 20s or so. I didn't start playing outright like in high school or anything. So yeah, but I always wanted to do tabletop RPG. I just hadn't the resources or the friends to do it with. So yeah, I was very interested into that. I was already reading at 14 the Dungeons and Dragons rulebook, but I have just nobody to play with. Yeah, but I was into Form role-playing game. Yeah, this is old.
Yeah, no, I remember those.
Yeah, so yeah, it was very text-based, of course, but I was always into that. So I guess that's pretty much what I am in role-playing space.
So I'm assuming that you do have a group now. How did you meet them?
So I met them through MMORPG right now, mainly. I have, of course, my girlfriend in the group, but most people have I've met them through MMORPG, like Final Fantasy 14, for example. So the current group is how I met them. But when I just started, it was basically in engineering school. We were talking about tabletop RPG with a friend. He didn't play it that much, but he told me, "Hey, there's this tabletop RPG club that is just right outside our school." I said, "Sure, let's give it a try," and so I started. That's basically I started. I started playing Dungeons and Dragons and multiple other TTRPG for that matter, but I mainly stick to let's just stay with the time I stayed with Dungeons and Dragons mainly. I started on 3.5, which was really cool because it is a complex game.
Oh yeah.
There's so many rules, and I wouldn't recommend that for people that want to try any TTRPG, but have no experience in any TTRPG or any rule set at all. D&D 3.5 is it can be messy. It can be messy at this time.
The shocking thing to me is that it gets simpler with each edition for D&D.
Yes, and for me it's kind of a good thing, but with the time, I'm lacking more and more Pathfinder things, like what I call Pathfinder things, where there is complexity, but you gotta read the rules and you gotta read it hard because you get to go and search for what you need to do for your character, there's this archetype that could be cool. And you can fetch that spell with that class and that prestige class. It's very complicated, but you can pretty much do whatever you want, and the rule will support that.
Yes.
And that the feeling I got from 3.5, but this was my first D&D, and mainly my first tabletop RPG. I played a couple games before that, but this was the first time I played in campaign. I have a recurring character and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So the first time was very confusing. Like I was thinking, like, am I doing this wrong? Like,
Oh yeah.
I could do that. Oh yeah, right. I could do that. Sure. So, and after time, I've started DMing with Warhammer 40k on the first edition of Dark Heresy because I'm a big fan of it. I'm a big fan of that universe. So I just started. I was basically saying, okay, I like 40k and I want to start DMing. Maybe there's a game about that, and yes, for sure there was. So it was called Dark Heresy, and for people who don't know, it's basically a very horror action like RPG game, which is it's not like horror like you could find in a Call of Cthulhu game. It's more like you will be facing horrors, and you kind of not meant to kill them, but the mission is to kill them, basically.
Okay.
So that's a feel that that resonates with a lot of people. Actually, more people than I initially thought. Because the first time I started DMing was with actually 10 people, which I thought initially was we're a bunch of friends. It's all right. It will go smoothly. It did not go smoothly at all. 10 people is horrendous to DM to DM for. It's too much people. And thanks to a couple of really old player, veteran player, people that know DMing and knows it will go bad. Basically, they helped me through the game, so that's what got me in DMing. And with the time, I was just kind of DMing D&D, a couple games left and right with people, just to make them discover what is TTRPG, basically. Not really what is Dungeons and Dragons, but mostly what it's like to be at a table and role playing and everything.
Right.
And with the time, I got the hang of it. I got the hang of what is Dungeons and Dragons, what I like about it, what kind of things I like in an RPG. I DM'd also a lot Starfinder, which is the sci-fantasy, sci-fi side of Pathfinder.
Right.
And I really loved it because it was very fantasy, but not in a medieval sense. Like, but there were still dragons, but not like in a big castle or your typical dungeon and everything. It was really like it was basically like Guardian of the Galaxy, but with dragons, basically. So I liked it.
Yeah.
I liked it very much. And then in the background, I was just trying to make a world because I thought it was cool. I thought I liked the just the thing about I can just share these random ideas I have of things I find cool, and make them a coherent thought for people, and the coherent things for people to play in. So I was just walking out, and this is like very Russian doll things to work on, because you're like, okay, I'm starting small. I'm starting with that's how I started. You start just with a kingdom, right? It's just one country. It's really not that bad. But then you get so invested in that, but it basically it starts to become your whole world if you don't put a stop to it. You just don't put okay. If you don't say, I will just go and not work on this part of my world and just do something else, do something else in that world, because what is happening just outside of the map I'm just drawing right now. So yeah, that's basically how Akrimyos was born. It's just
Right.
really, trying to make something very unified on random thoughts that things I find cool, and I want my players to play in.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned a lot of like sci-fi stuff that you'd been doing earlier, like Starfinder or Warhammer 40K, obviously.
Yeah,
Is Acrimyos, keep
Akrimyos.
stumbling, Acrimyos, keep stumbling over it. Thank you. Is Acrimyos a sci-fi setting at all?
So it is a medieval fantasy settings. If you play in it, you play quote unquote your typical D&D game, right? You will find kingdom and castle and everything, but the world has been constructed as a sci-fi world. Like they are literally, maybe we'll get into more details later, but about the lore and everything. But for example, there's clearly to my players now the sense that there was a big empire in the past that basically ruled all over this world. Um, and they were not coming from that planet. And I specifically said planet. Like they basically came on spaceship.
Okay.
My player don't know what kind of spaceship it is or anything, but it is not mentioned that they teleported here. For example, they did not use a portal. Like you could travel between planes for that. For that matter, like you can go to the hells of the abyss just by teleporting there. No, they came with means of transportation, like basically a spaceship. Yes.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Let's get into more about the world. So Acrimyos is a fantasy world, like you said, both like sci-fi bits sprinkled in.
Yes.
What's the world like physically?
So basically, this is a very high fantasy world, and in a sense that basically, um, I want the players to feel that every nation, every civilization, whatever, however small they are or big they have to grasp magic to survive, to thrive, basically. So I have this idea that every part of the world is very, if there is a civilization and they do not have ways to manipulate magic and make magic works for them, they will die. They will die with, and it will be just maybe because they don't have access to certain resources. Um, Maybe they don't have access to um, they can protect themselves from threats. Could be multiple reasons for that, but it is a high fantasy settings in a way that wherever you go, you will find people that manipulate magic, but not in the same way every time. Um, they could be, for now they are the players are in the Kingdom of Calham, which is on the continent of Ardentia, and it is a very typical. So people here manipulate the magic by basically their theory is what they call the flux.
Okay.
It is the what they call the flux is actually raw magic, but just stagnate everywhere. Like if it were a gas, that would be like magic. And so there are winds of flux. And what I like about it is that even if people manipulate magic maybe very easily, they don't have all the rules in hand. And they could have the feeling that the rules are not the same everywhere, but they are. It's just that every civilization think of it differently, completely differently. And better example I have of that is right in the north of the Kingdom of Calham. There are the highlands, and the highlands are basically um, home of a lot of monsters,
Yep.
first, and then there are fortresses of survivors, and they manipulate what they call the magic of matter. So they manipulate raw materials and give them magic for that. So it's very steampunkish, to be fair. I want that feel of heavy machinery working on this very strange like machinery that basically walks and walk by itself, um, just because they are basically magical engineers that tinkers the thing, and by magic you have this very complicated and intricate machinery which the Kingdom of Calm do not have because they do not need complicated machinery because they have access to a larger and more accessible way of basically they have a magic more accessible basically.
Right. Right. Okay.
So yeah, this is basically how it feels. It's like everywhere you go, you will encounter some spellcaster on some level, and the best way I have to describe it is if you have a thriving village, it basically means you have either a priest, a cleric that can maybe bless the crops and everything, or you have maybe a druid that can do that. But he's in the village. He's part of that community. It is they do not thrive because because they got lucky or because they or anything like that. They thrive because they have someone that have the knowledge and the means to manipulate magic.
Of course. Yeah. Um, there's something you said earlier about everyone having their own way of understanding how magic works, but the
Yeah.
rules are the same throughout all the world.
Yes.
Like I feel like there's some ways of interpreting religion in the
Yeah.
real world that are very similar to that, where there's sort of a lot of shared elements between different religions.
Yes.
I thought that was interesting. That it's sort of like the mystical force that we have in our world is interpreted that way, and you've also carried that over into the fantasy world as well.
And for now, my players are they are level 6. They're just finishing this arc, so they didn't have yet the opportunities to just take a boat and just sail to other continents and everything, or anything. So maybe they didn't have the grasp about it, but there are continents that do not believe in magic like the Kingdom of Calham does. This will be the case for the Halhamsa continent on the very south. They think that magic is a rule of nature. Point. Period. For them, there is no other way to conceive magic. It is not like a flux that just goes through the air or anything. If you want to master magic, you have to convince elemental and primordial being to give it to you, basically. And so, yeah, that's the feeling I want in that world. It's very important to me because I basically like high fantasy, and for me, it is the best way I have to describe the how magic would work in that world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I never put that much thought into how it worked in my campaign, but yeah, it's really cool that you did. Um, so you have the Kingdom of Calham. Are there other cultures or places that you want to talk about as well?
Yeah, let's just say for now, if you still have the world map, it's a very work in progress right now. I would say that maybe we can talk about the the two continents of Ardentia and Sindentia because they shared a big history together. But for now, there are if you were talking about radio civilization, maybe I would say the Boreans Reach, which is so at the very north of Ardentia. It's behind a big mountain range that's called the Giant's Wall, which is
Good name.
which is a mountain range that is basically the frontier between giants and other civilization. And there are a lot of very, very powerful beings that just get the giants in check. My players have encountered one of them, which is a white dragon that took a north, basically. But it's not really a north, but it do feel like that. But it's more like he's doing a favor to someone else. But basically,
okay.
it took enough to basically keep the giants in check. And so this dragon got a couple fun name like the last season, the last winter. So it is a very powerful being. But if you go beyond the Giant's Wall and to the Boreans Reach, it's a very cold place because there's what the giants would call the Frostfire Moor at the very, very north of the Boreans Reach. And it is basically what every tribes of giants want to fight over. They think it has some kind of divine purpose. It's basically a sacred land for them, and every giant chief wants a piece of it, want to control it, because they think they basically can achieve godhood through that.
Okay, so the giants up there are fighting over a piece of land that's called the
Yes.
Frostfire Maw. Is that right?
Yes, and so the Frostfire Maw is actually a pit. It could be like a volcano, but I don't want it to be so high up. It's a pit of eternal fire in this frozen wasteland.
Okay.
It's a pit of eternal fire, and they fight over this piece of land. Basically because they think they will achieve godhood if they are the master of it. So every giant's chief wants to fight over it, and basically want this to start a crusade. It's how best I would describe it. They think if they hold that power, they could unite every tribes of giant and basically start a crusade and claim more lands. The real reason behind it is because giants have a very, very, very special way of using magic. And again, we're going magic road, but
Yeah.
basically giants are magic eaters, but they do not control that. They just suck up every magic around them, every source of magic. So that's why the Boreans Reach is a frozen wasteland, because there's no more magic in this. And the Frostfire Maw is actually a pit of just raw arcanic power that just is there, and it's just basically materializing in form of lava, but it's not really lava. It's not really fire. Um, it's just a raw piece of arcane power that just pour into the world, and they try to fight over it to achieve godhood, and they probably would achieve if they do.
Okay.
They probably would achieve if they do. It's just that they are fighting of who's getting it, basically.
Okay. Yeah, that matches really well with the lore for the existing Eldritch and Death Giants, if you've looked at those before.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems very similar to how those work mechanically within the game. That's really cool. Yeah, that's neat. That's very, very different from Calham and just right
Yeah.
over the mountains from it.
Yeah, but they are actually, my players are actually on Giants Hall right now, not chasing any giants. They are like on a not so populated giants side of the Giants Hall. They have encountered the White Dragon. They have encountered her, and she was kind to one of them because one of the player characters has a background history with this dragon, but
Uh-huh.
I mean it's a white dragon, so basically she was playing nice just for that player character. She didn't give really a damn about the other ones, and to be fair, in that world, dragons and especially ancient dragons, I want them to feel like to the unknowing eyes, they would look like gods, basically. They're not. They're clearly not. They would look like gods. They can change the weather. They have tremendous powers. They can cast really, really powerful magic. So yeah, they would look like God, but they're not. They're not.
Gotcha. Well, that segues into my next question really well. What are the gods that you have in your campaign?
So I have pretty much I've kept the name from Forgotten Kingdoms gods because I don't have really that much inspirations for name. I'm really bad at that. Really.
That's all right.
I just had one one god that is on. I just created it, but the other gods are like different version of the Forgotten Kingdom. Like I just say, okay, it's basically him, but it's not him. So I'll take that god and just change a lot of things about it. But I will still name Tempest. It is not like the Tempest for from the Forgotten Realm, but he is a god of war. But it does not the same thing as the other ones, as the other Tempest from the Forgotten Realms. It worked out for now, but there's a big work for me to just name them differently because at this point it's just their name, but they're not related at all to the Forgotten Realms lore. So I guess it can be confusing.
Is
But
it
the
still like
god,
the same character?
no,
Like,
it's not. It's not really. It's not. I just took the name because okay, I'm okay. Some name I found cool, so I say I will name it like that for now. But yeah, there's a lot of I didn't want my gods to feel like they were the usual gods. You have to have a god of war, and you have a god of light and anything. But I find it's my biggest weakness in world building is basically godhood and pantheon, and basically how to make religion. I'm really really weak on that side.
Okay.
It's really a. I like to have the same feel about magic and for religion. Um, I have civilization and people in this world that do not believe in God in a way that they do not say that they do not exist. It's just that they do not get that power from them, any power or any prayers to them, for that matter. Um, but I don't want to have this multiple pantheon that everybody on that world believe in these gods. No, I don't really like that things that kind of thing.
Uh-huh. Um, so having the name be kind of disconnected from what it means in the like normal D&D official settings, was that ever confusing for your players, or were they not as familiar with the original?
They're not as familiar. There's maybe one player that is very into the Forgotten Realms, and it wasn't confusing at all. But I guess it's because for now gods don't play a big part in the campaign. They maybe had one reference to the Lady of the Moon, which is basically Selene.
Yeah.
But she's called Selene. I did not take the lore about Selene at all, but she's called Selene for now, and that will do it.
Yeah.
But there are multiple references to Bahamut. They're actually fighting a cult of Tiamat now. Is it how you call it? Tiamat? I don't know.
I'm not sure what the actual correct pronunciation is. I think it's a Babylonian word, right?
Yeah, the mother of dragons. That's it. But
Right.
they are fighting against a cult, which is my setting. It's a very very old religion. The draconic religion are very old. Nobody really worship them anymore. It's basically like it's basically fall out of fashion, and very ancient tribes still worship draconic figures. Would it be Bahamut or Tiamat? But that doesn't mean that these gods do not try to interfere with the mortals. And so that's basically what is happening in the campaign for now.
Okay, gotcha. I wanted to ask about the races in your campaign. Mm-hmm. We talked about giants a bit. What about like humans, dwarves, elves? All the typical ones.
They're all the typical ones. I am not a strong believer in just throwing aside any races. I try to include as much as needed, really, because I think I really like the feel of going in one place and you literally cannot comprehend the species that they are at certain places, and so I think it always make for a more interesting world. But there are people that do not like having multiple races, which I can totally emphasize. What I like is basically just I take it as a challenge basically every time. Mm-hmm. I take it as a challenge. Say, okay, I take this race. It looks cool. I don't know where it lives yet, but I will try to come up with something that will make them part of my world right now, in the most coherent way possible. So The thing is, so I have basically human elves, which in my world, high elves and wood elves and drow are actually the same kind of elf, just culturally different. They are the same kind. They just have very, very different cultural difference. They have dwarves, of course, halfling, goblin. Goblin are in my world like they have this ability to in a very few generation to adapt to where they live. So goblin are actually kind of part of civilization, of other civilization. You can encounter goblin in major cities, for example. They call big eyes, big eyes goblin. They are goblin that just adapted and their body changed to be more accustomed to other races, so to humans or elf or dwarf or everything. But my players have already encountered two other kind of goblins, which are the big ears and the big hands. The big ears, which are basically goblin hunters. They are very thorough in nature, and the big hands are basically scrapper and engineer. They do they just survive by exploiting the land and making big machinery out of it. There are gnomes. After that, there are orcs. There's a big history in Calham about orcs. Because the kingdom was basically funded after an orc invasion has been repelled. So there's a bit of lore about orc and half orc, for that matter. After that, half elf, kobold, what I could. There's Dragonborn.
Right.
There are Goliath, Tiefling. I did not make like the big things about Azimar as much as Tiefling, but they do exist. It's just they are very rare.
Gotcha.
They are, I try to incorporate them as many as possible. Like I really like to have this feeling when you go into a city and you don't know what kind of thing you will encounter there. It allows me after that to make big contrasts with other cities that are maybe less appreciative of diversity. So it just communicate that maybe they're not as kind as we think, because they don't allow, I don't know, they don't allow any other races that this race in their city, that kind of thing.
Okay, so mostly people are living together with the different races, and they're not really segregated.
No, then they did not encounter that for now. There are places of the world that do function like that, like maybe the Scales Coast on Ardentia, which is not really a country and more like a geographical place, which is which there is a not like a big war, but there is a bit of intrigue between dragons and on Scales Coast. That's basically why it is called the Scales Coast. And they tend to not like what. Basically, it's not based on race, but it's based on scales. So they don't like anything that do not bear scales in there. They tend to see them as prey or nuisance, basically.
That makes a certain amount of sense. I had another question, but earlier we talked about like the gods. Now you're using the slightly interpreted usual D&D gods, but There's also like the how is the earth formed and how is each god born? Do you have you come up with answers for that for your campaign, or is that more of like still a mystery?
So gods are basically mortals that one way or another have become their own source of magic powers. They became, whether through a very powerful magic item, an artifact, or maybe another gods give them a godhood, or maybe they have a rich understanding of magic that is so out of this world that they basically became gods. It's really like civilization try to harvest magic from something. Would it be the flux or making pacts with primordial entities or anything? But gods, if they become gods, it's because they have become their own source of arcane power, basically. So they do have this idea that they can basically create more magic by themselves. Now, how they were born are very different between all of them. It's really I do not like the Pathfinder approach of there's an intricate and complete history of how God became a god.
Yep.
I really like more the Greek mythology approach, which is he's a god. Yeah, that's it. You don't have really the details about that. It just he is right now at the time where you're reading this, he is or she is a god, and that's basically how it is. You don't have any more technical details about like, oh yeah, Zeus can transform into gold. How that's worked, I don't know, but it does. It does. It can turn into a bull. It does. Yeah. And so that's what I like in Godhood, is that I read these little stories to just emphasize certain aspect of this god. Like, for example, Tempus is this basically warlord that is tired of war, and he just sees things like he's basically fed up with war. He just wants to appreciate things that war and strategy and intrigue did not bring him. So I have this like very metaphorical text, about him, which where he tries to write a poem. He is really bad at it. And he asks his friend Ogma, which is the god of knowledge, to write him a poem, because he doesn't understand what it is, but he doesn't understand either why you need a poem. Why is it useful? But he's so intrigued by that because he never done it. He has never done it, and he cannot do it. So I have these little, very short stories about God, about who they are and what they aspire to do in this world. And yeah, that's basically how I imagine godhood. Is that they are people that became so good at what they do that they are their own source of powers, and at the same time they are very twisted. A lot of time, gods sacrifice themselves because, they have nothing better to do, really. Really, they have nothing better to do, and it's a bit sad on one side, and on the other side, They do it because they think it's how they can get back to people that worship them. So yeah, that's really how I see godhood. And so about the creation of the world, so people, at least maybe erudites on Akrimyos, would know that they are on a planet. They would know. They wouldn't have a really good understanding about it. But in a world when you can just ask a god for a question, I think someone would have figured that they are on a planet. And yeah, it's really just it's really like our Earth. People just say, okay, it started existing at one point. We don't know exactly when, but it started existing. It started existing before we even had a concept about gods, and even before gods even existed. So it must be a natural thing. They kind of understand that. Akrimos, so it's a planet. It only has one moon, which is like, I heard recently that it's not a fantasy world if you only have one moon. But at least I can say my moon is inhabited. There are inhabitants on that moon.
Ooh, cool.
Which are called the observers. The observers, they are giants, but they are not your typical bulk giant, like your very beefy frost giant.
Right.
Or they are very slender-like giants with very few facial features that are actually worshippers of Selene. They
Makes sense.
but they do not worship them. They do not worship her as a god. They just thought that she was the right person to protect Akrimyos. And so they decided to follow her into the night sky, and they just settle on the moon. And they're called observers because they have this ability to see into the night sky, to see basically into space, right? And see things that normal people, if they are on Akrimyos, could not see. They actually have seen coming the big empire that invaded Akrimyos. Before that, they have seen everything, but they do not interfere.
Okay.
They do not interfere. They are like scholars, basically. They see what was happening in the past. Like, I really like that they can see into the past of the world, just like we can do in our world. When you look through a telescope and you see stars that maybe are dead, but you can still see the lights.
Right.
And so they can see the past like that. They can see the present, and so they want to see the future. What will be happening after that? So yeah, and after that, so Akrimyos is in a solar system, basically. So there's their sun, which is like a yellow sun. It's not a very big deal for that. People tend to think this is Lathander that sacrificed himself to give warmth to Akrimyos. And they are not right, but they are not wrong either.
Okay.
They are not wrong either. But maybe this is something that maybe my players will see. So I would not get too much into that. And there are a couple of planets, of course. There are actually one planet that people tend to think it is another world. It's actually a living being. Just a living being that just is dormant. I do not know what to do with him, but I thought it was cool that there was something that people think it's a planet, but it's actually a living thing, just floating in space, and they are in the same solar system, but than the rest of the world. So yeah, there are weird things. Maybe it's clearly my sci-fi loving that get that get too much
Yeah, I
space
was
in
gonna
it.
say.
But yes, and I completely assume that part.
You had earlier you mentioned one of the continents is called Ardentia.
Yeah.
So like silver, right?
No, it's more about fire. Ardentia was called basically by people who migrated to it, who colonized it. They had a big, big belief in fire when they arrived, which is not the case today. But they arrived, so they basically these people that colonized the south of Ardentia, they basically made the Kingdom of Calham, which is a very young kingdom. It's barely a century old.
Okay.
Before that, there were just a lot of tribes, of human tribes. Yeah, because they were migrating from Sindentia. So they colonized, but they colonized because they had to flee Sindentia. They had to flee from there. They were coming from a place that's called the Old Empire of Lernia. Well, they came from a place. It was called just the Empire of Lernia, but today it's called the Old Empire of Lernia.
Right.
And they basically it was an empire that just crumbled onto itself, just by too much political intrigue. Like basically, people wanted too much power in a sense that it made the empire crumble itself. And so there were so many tribes that just left the continent and went to this new continent. They call it Ardentia because they had this feeling, as I said, about fire, and it was a big belief from them. They were trying to find a place where they could light a new fire, and that's because they thought that they have lost the warmth and the comfort of the previous empire. And basically, this fire basically just burned everything. It's maybe a very dramatic and poetic way to say it, but this is how they approached back then, which is not quite 1,000 years ago, but almost. This is how they saw it back in the days. Today, this belief about fire is non-existent. Nobody believes so religiously about fire and about this thing about hope which hold in the fire. Nobody believes about that anymore. There are other cults, other religion, other things about that, but the name stayed. Name stayed.
Gotcha. I think I was mixing it up with Argent before.
Yeah.
Arden. Yeah.
But basically, Ardentia is based off Ardent, which is fire, and Sindentia is a play word around cinders. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Makes sense to me. Did you want to talk any more about your campaign world before we got into like the events of your current campaign that you've got going on or finished up recently?
We maybe a bit about big timelines, how the present day happened. So basically, they do not know they cannot put exact dates about that. But scholars in Akrimyos know that before all of this, They were actually a big empire that came basically from space to colonize this world. They came here. They were called the Revenant Empire, and they basically colonized all of the world, the entirety of the world, by themselves. And what's really intriguing is that they did not master any magic at all. They just came with very, very advanced technology and just conquer everything on the planet. And they do not really know why, but this empire just kind of crumbled. Like I wanted to have this feel of the Roman Empire, like it was too big for its own good. They relied too much on slaves. They rely too much on basically experimental slaves. They know that current races are actually evolution in a very Darwinian sense. They are evolution of basically these slaves that were bioengineered by these revenants. And so they relied too much on slavery, and at one point slaves got up and rise and defeated this revenant. And it's not clear whether when and how the empire crumbled technically. They think that actually there are some gods that could be old revenant, but they're not sure on that. And even if they're not gods, like mythical creatures could be either revenant or result of revenant experiments. So this is actually a big point of maybe on the campaign actually about the revenant, and they do kind of know that when the revenant invaded, there were actually people on Akrimyos. It was inhabited by an old races, and they wiped them culturally and physically. The revenant made sure to basically destroy traces of this civilization. They did not do a perfect job, but it is very complicated to have any sense of who was on Akrimyos before the Revenant.
Yeah, that's really cool. So you're saying that was like a lead up to like the campaign that you're running now?
Yeah. Yes.
So you said earlier they're going from Calham to through the Giant's Wall now, is that right?
Yeah, they actually are. In the big arc climax will be in the Giant's Wall. Yeah. So to sum up, it's a group of 4 players. I wanted to make something that will be a bit railroady, but not too much, because there are 2 new players, and what I meant is 2 very new players in the group. They did not do any TTRPG at all before that, and they just heard about Dungeons and Dragons. That's all. So the campaign is actually with 4 players, so with 5, and I wanted to make a campaign, but divided into arcs, basically. I have done campaigns before, but it was just one bulky campaign, you know. Like you start level 1, you finish level 20, and here we go, just nonstop. And it was a bit much. It was difficult to follow regularly for me, because I always wanted to have, you know, the bad guy, you know, the antagonist show up, but in the same time would say this guy has to hold up from level 1 to level 20.
Right, yeah.
And so I cannot have a guy that just walks up to players at level 2 or 3 and just be there at level 20 and be the same guy. And so it was basically having 2 campaigns, because I was DMing the players, but I also had to DM like just for me, just for this bad guy. It was very confusing for me. So
Yeah.
now it's just divide. I want to divide in arcs. So first arcs for me was level 1 to level 6. So they are on the end of the first arc, and then it will be something like to level 6 and 10 or 11, and then 11 to 16, and then 16 to 20 maybe, if that holds up until then. But
All right.
but so for the first arc, I wanted to make something a bit railroady, not too much, but because they basically half of the players are totally new players on that. So I wanted to make a kind of tutorial arcs of what is D&D,
Right.
which is very difficult to do, because of course you can do anything. So that means no amount of DMing will show everything you can do in D&D, but at least they have a good sense of how to roleplay. They're not too confused by the story while they're learning the rules, while they are learning to play with each other and roleplay during the campaign. So it's kind of railroady, and I know it's major sins to railroad, but it has its advantage, clearly. But they are coming to the end of this arc. So to sum up the plot, there is the arc happens. So the Kingdom of Calham has been on for like 100 years or something, barely a century. It's a very, very young kingdom. And the king actually is also very young. He's 15 years old. Which,
wow.
because basically the first king, which was his grandfather, was basically a war hero. He helped and repelled the orc invasion. And so he was a war hero. Everybody loves him, basically. And when he died, he had a son. And his son was actually very sick. He was really not a good political figure at all. He basically let other people run the kingdom with them. He had a queen, he had a wife, which was the oldest siblings of another big family of the Kingdom of Calham, which are the Broi Rasun, which is a very military family. They are basically the second most important army in the Kingdom of Calham. And so they had a son, which is the current king. And it was basically just a shit show, like, clearly. The king at this stage is not a good political figure. Is really bad. He basically let other people run the kingdom, and so there are a lot of guilds that take too much power in the kingdom, and a lot of people just criticize him for that. When he has a son, his wife died giving birth. So now face this very complicated political tension with basically the big military family of this kingdom, because they are in this process of grieving, and they hate each other's guts. And the king dies basically of sickness. We do not know if it's poison or if it is really sickness. But the thing is, now the king de facto is this young king, which is called Petrus Calham. And the thing is, he's 15. He is 15. He's technically the king. And if it were not for the help of some people that stay very faithful to the Calham family, he would have been overthrown, clearly. But now it is this kind of tension in the kingdom. With this family that is very powerful, that have powerful eyes, that basically says this king will not fit. We need to have someone bigger and with more power and willing to drive this kingdom in charge. And people that says, let the kids grow. I'm sure if he's mentored good, he will be a good king, just like his grandfather. And
of course.
So this is this political tension, and it's basically a civil war waiting to happen, basically, which will be happening if players don't make it. And so there was, and so this is the tension, but it's actually none of them are the bad guys. It's actually an old veteran soldiers of Suna, which is the city of the warrior Hasun, so the uncle side family of the current king. It's an old veteran that basically people for dramatic reason call him a martyr, but he did not die. He was basically he's a half elf. He's an old half elf, and he basically lost his squad of they're called. I have the name in French, but I did not translate it. They are basically soldiers, but with magic powers. They are blade mage, to be really precise. And so he lost all his squad to the first waves of orcs that attacked the kingdom of what will become Kingdom of Calham. He was made prisoners because orcs wanted to have intels about how the tribes at this stage were organized further in the south, and he was tortured. He saw all his people, all his soldiers, his faithful soldiers, killed and slaughtered before him, and he was freed. When the war was over and the orcs been repelled. He was freed, but he basically stand there and being in full PTSD, and he starts hearing voices that basically these people in charge, these lords and duke and kings, they do not know what it takes clearly to run the kingdom, and basically what it takes to bring peace in a kingdom, to bring protection in a kingdom. And in the first time, he started a bit ignoring that part, and he just asked for his lord to have to retire in a castle, in the Giant's Wall. That's where they will fight him. Actually, he just want to retire. I just want to spend his day alone. And what it just see is basically lords and kings just bickering at each other, but not doing anything for the people of the kingdom. He just sees that there are just these two powerful families that will basically go at each other's throat, and he's just thinking that there are more powerful threats out there, and this kingdom is not safe. So he's basically just thinking in circles, and this thinking in circles is actually Tiamat. Tiamat that just show him that he needs to be in power. He needs to be guiding this kingdom, because he has known. He clearly knows the threat that comes to it. Of course, it does not know everything. It's just Tiamat just making this bigger than it is. But so he starts to make this cult of Tiamat, but he is actually a lieutenant, so he has some strategical knowledge, and he does not do like big attacks on things. Basically, he just uses mercenaries to disguise them as bandits to do what he wants to do. And that's how they discovered that some caravans were not attacked by bandits, but actually they were mercenaries. It was not like people just coming and doing a highway banditry or anything. No, it was actually mercenaries doing the things. And why does he do that? Because he wants to accumulate some magical item to do his deeds, and it culminates to basically he basically made the PC believes that he wanted to kill the king, which he does not want to. He wanted actually to make a failed attempt to kill the king, so it would spark the civil war. And that's what happened. They were at this big reception held by the king, and so all these very influential and political people around, and he basically disguised one of his acolytes as a servant of Suna, of the warrior Hassan, to basically make a failed attempt to kill the king. And so now these two big families have a reason to go at each other's throat, because there were people that believed that the warrior Hassan wanted to end the king's life, and you must do something about it, right? Even if the king said, well, this sounds sketchy, right? It doesn't. I really feel that these people did not really wanted to kill me. People want blood right now. They want blood. It just sparked the fire of civil war, and so this immediate call for action made the king say, okay, nobody can leave the capital until this is sorted out. Which, for the warrior Hassan, they think, and they kind of play into that, they think they are being held hostages now. And so now there are all the political figures that support the warrior Hassan that just say, you can just do that. You can just do that to your people, my king. And now this is basically, they know they have a time bomb actually to bring to bring the bad guy to justice and make him admit his crime. So because this is basically the only way. This is this way or a big civil war in the Kingdom of Calham. So basically, this summarizes the plot.
Okay, yeah, that's that's a lot of stuff to go through.
Yeah. That's I wanted them to have a kind of feeling of the political landscape, but being
Yeah, definitely.
but just being a D&D adventure. Like you will go there and ask people out and go into this tomb. Oh, you find some cultists. Maybe they have some intel and also magical item. I'm very generous with magical item in a way, because I want them to do cool. I want the players to do cool stuff, and I want to also have an excuse for myself to throw them, big monsters and big traps, big things they have to solve with the magical items they have.
Gotcha. Oh man, I feel like you went over a lot of the stuff that I usually ask about.
Okay.
I was curious though, because you have all these like different ways of interpreting how to access magic within your world.
Mm-hmm.
If there's any interesting like mechanics that you've come up with to represent that for like how the players build their characters.
I don't usually do extra mechanics, but mainly because I don't want people to be confused about, oh yeah, this is D&D rules and now this is this campaign rules. I always think that people want to play D&D first. It just happens to be in my world. But I would come up maybe one day with different mechanics. It's mostly about lore and story, for example, in the Kingdom of Calham, this is very easy to meet a mage, a wizard. It's very easy. There is even a school of magic. Like it's a big magic academy, and they are even integrated in regular armies. So it's very easy to meet mages, which is not the case in the Highlands, where you could meet a more artificer-like people, more engineers, magic engineers in some way, which is basically not the case. It's totally different. For example, in Halhasem, you could on the very south of Akrimyos, which are basically mostly druid and clerics, because they manipulate magic through what they believe are primordial power, but they do not try really to understand what is behind it. They just are they just see it like this. There's this powerful being, and if I'm really good at talking to him, they will give me powers, and that's how they get the magic powers. But it's mostly through lore and storytelling. Maybe one day I will do magic, like an actual game mechanics magic about that. Would it be maybe just very just for a one shot, like, oh, for this fight you have to take care of this mechanic, or something more regular, like oh, this magic item works like that, or anything, but not for now. Not really for now.
Okay, yeah, that's fair to do it that way for sure. Well, did you have anything else you wanted to add about your campaign or the campaign world?
Well, this is a very work in progress kind of thing. Even on the big map, it is far from complete. You can clearly see that there are there are entire continents that are far more detailed than others, and there is a reason for that. It's because I did not detail them. That's the thing, and it's always difficult to like make details in advance because you want enough details, of course, on your world for people to be invested in. Like, oh, what's that on the map, right? So
Right.
just that. They basically want to go somewhere, and but you don't want too much details because after that you kind of have to respect that. You have to respect all these things you put up. And oh yeah, um, I said that, but since I'm saying it's not that much fun right now that I'm playing it, I'm kind of scrapping it. Yes. So yeah, it's always a bit difficult about that. So I try to be to details what I need, like political figures, landscapes,
Right.
so that kind of stuff. Very old lore and ancient things, but I'm not trying too much on the detail about the day-to-day life because I have this feeling that the day-to-day life of a place for D&D is basically whatever you need to be the most dramatic and the most engaging in the story. It has to be this way. It is if you need to have a dragon because you want this very powerful being right now in your campaign. Okay, there's a dragon now. That's it. You don't. Yeah, basically. But if you put a dragon before that at this exact spot, and the players, for whatever reason, just decide to not go on that spot and just go the other way, now you just have a dragon, and worst case, and it can get even worse, you said to them there was a dragon over there. So they said, okay, we know there was a dragon over there. We're not going to see it because we have other stuff to do. And now you're stuck with a dragon, you don't know what to do with it. It's just there. I don't know what he's doing, but he's there. And I don't really like that. So yeah, it's very work in progress overall. But I'm having a lot of fun creating details on that world, and yeah, I really hope my players. I think they do, but I really hope my players are having fun too.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you also have your World Anvil site.
Yeah.
And I've been looking through it with Google Translate on. It's syntax and like word choice never translate really well that way, but it's enough to understand what you're talking about, and it is in readable English that way, which is nice. It's much better than what I was expecting based off of what translation used to be like for automatic translation. But yeah, there's tons of stuff here on how to the gods that we were talking about earlier, and all that other stuff as well. So yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah, we didn't talk a lot about factions inside. I really fleshed out factions on the Kingdom of Calham because that's what I needed basically. I needed that, but yeah, I really like pulling up a lot of factions in very small places because now you can make connection between them. Do they hate each other? Do they work together? Do they have different goals? And I feel that players do like a lot of that, and it's kind of more the better about that because they feel that they can make choices by deciding, are we against this faction or are we siding with this faction? Even if most of the time they do not side with a faction, they side with an NPC that belongs to a faction. But they do like, I feel they do like that. They do like to see, basically on the Giants War right now, in my campaign, they encountered a patch of the Silver Knight, which is not a Dark Souls reference. I thought it was cool to call them that, and then I remember, oh yeah, they are in Dark Souls too. They are called like that in Dark Souls too. But it is basically the army, the personal army of the king, and there is a patch of Silver Knights in the Giant's Wall, basically because he wants to appease people and make them go on his side against in this civil war, because basically everybody thinks, okay, today or tomorrow there will be a civil war in the Kingdom of Calham. So he wants basically lords to be on his side, and so he has this patch of Civil Knight that goes on the Giant's Wall, and basically just to show that, oh yeah, the king cares about the frontiers and keeping the giants at bay. And so I get the feeling that players do like to see, oh, these are the Silver Knights, and they come with this lore. And you have this faction now that have basically their own ideas about, well, this is the Giant's Wall. What kind of people live there? What do they think about this? What do they think about this, about that? And so I get the feeling they do really like it. So I would say a faction enthusiast. Like, I put a lot of factions in very small places. So yeah, that's basically what I like about also world building is, what are the connections between the people that already live here.
Yeah, cool. It's good to have all that kind of stuff in there. It's something I feel like I'm missing from my world right now, for sure.
But it's really just it's really just, okay, what people think is important, and most of the time, if something is really important, people have taken something in charge to solve that problem, to solve a matter that they think is important. So that's how you create a faction. And so, yeah, the king needs a personal army. So here goes the Silver Knight. Magic is important in my world. So if there is a civilization that rely on, your old fantasy magic, which is scrolls and wands and everything, this kind of magic, the old spell, well, there will be an Academy of Magic, because they need to train people. They also need to protect themselves against magic. That kind of stuff. I have also the sorority of the trees, which are basically monster hunter. To be fair, they are basically monster hunter. They do chase and hunt very nasty beasts, which are the result of what they call the corruption of nature. They think that something is corrupting nature at one place, and so they come and they slay that beast. So, and that's how I created all these factions.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff. Man, do you have anything else you want to add?
Well, I think, yeah. I don't think I think we done a good look around of Akrimyos. So as I said, it's a work in progress, but as every world builder, it's always a work in progress, I guess.
Yeah, of course. All right, well, thank you very much, Natowa. This was great. It's a lot of good stuff there.
Well, man, thank you for having me. It's a very good idea for a podcast. It's a very good podcast. So, thank you.